Well, the U.S. Senate passing a bill today to condemn the use of human shields. The bipartisan effort, led by Senators Joe Donnelly and Ted Cruz, passed the Senate unanimously. The legislation would impose economic penalties on nations or terror groups that use civilians as human shields. The bill is now headed to the House, where Donnelly and Cruz are pushing for its swift passage. For more, we're joined by Eric Mandel. He's director at the Middle East Political Information Network. Eric, welcome back to Clearcut. Eric, good to have you with us. Eric, this legislation is certainly very welcome, but it seems long overdue. I mean, you would think that the U.S. would have long condemned the use of human shields. So what prompted this now?
Well, first of all, this has been quite a week in the Senate for both bipartisanship and for a value-based American foreign policy. 100-0 in our hyper-polarized political world for all of our senators from right to left to have come together to be against the use of human shields. But the idea, you would say, is why would anybody be against this? Well, part of this legislation is to prompt the UN Security Council to also act against human shields. But we have a lot of people in the world, a lot of governments in the world that want to rationalize and protect Hezbollah and Hamas for not being condemned for using human shields. Right now, the Mass March of Return, which has been going on since March, children, innocents, women have been placed in harm's way for propaganda points and to then blame Israel for disproportionate force. So it needed to be written down. It needs to show America again as a leader, and hopefully President Trump will take this legislation and as a mantle to go around the world and saying, everybody should be able to say that this horrendous war crime against international law using human shields, anybody who's against it, they should be embarrassed.
Yeah, I mean, Nikki Haley called out the United Nations for failing to condemn Hamas for its use of human shields. But what does this legislation mean, Eric, in terms of fighting those terrorist groups that use human shields? I mean, what does it enable the U.S. to do here?
Well, we had two pieces of legislation that were passed, the Stop Human Shields Act, and this week we also had the Hezbollah International Financing Prevention Act, which in joint will go against these American designated terrorist organizations that governments or individuals or organizations who support them, that there are now some more consequences with more bite, and putting the international world on notice that they are part of the problem. But there's one unifying theme that we have here. It's Iran being the supporter of Hamas, Iran directly controlling Hezbollah, Iran being complicit in so much of this actions against Israel that directly go against American national security interests. So I think, sometimes these things seem redundant or they're obvious, but they're not. And I think that America coming together and saying that this is outrageous, that human shields that are being used either deter attacks from a liberal democracy being Israel, or that they are used for propaganda points to point out disproportionate force, which is what some anti-Israel groups try to say, really is we're not playing into that game anymore. And so I think this is incredibly important.
But in terms of the action that the legislation allows the government to take, as we said, it allows it to sanction each foreign person who knowingly orders, controls, or otherwise directs the use of human shields, each person or organization. But, I mean, a sanction is going to be effective in stopping this because there are plenty of sanctions on Iran. It's not all of a sudden going to make Iran reconsider funding Hamas and Hezbollah if those sanctions haven't worked to date.
Well, you think about it. Even the 2012 Iran sanctions were never fully implemented by the president at that time, President Obama. Sanctions can have a biting effect if they're fully in place and we are willing to go to full length, not just being misled by the humanitarian damage that is done, because it is being done by the people who use human shields. So it's very, very important that economic sanctions are there, diplomatic sanctions, and supporting allies against who have to face these human shields. So it really does make a difference, and really will go to whether President Trump and his Treasury Department, Mnuchin, and all the other agencies will push this to the full length of what these sanctions are. So it could be that people will ignore this, but if they go and they implement them fully, it could be very effective.
All right, Eric, thank you so much. Eric Mandel, appreciate it.